Could it be Nissan finally has a plan? The last 3 years have proven that Nissan has struggled and has barely kept the lights on. Pretty much the CEO's been swapped out, the CFO's been swapped out, and anybody tied financially or otherwise to the head table at Nissan has decided to jump off the ship. They're not going down with this ship, baby. But you know what? Nissan has got some plans. There's some new changes. There's word something on the horizon for Nissan that could in fact be their exit plan to actually get them back into the market. Nissan claims that by 2030, they plan to have at least 40% of the market engulfed in electric vehicles. That's right, while a lot of us are scrambling and worrying about, the reliability issues with Nissan and their CVT transmissions, and the Jatcos as well, some of their, their turbo VC engines, we're worried about how can they not get that reliability back? Well, maybe they don't need to even worry about that reliability. Because the way it looks right now, some of their most legendary cars, like the Z car, has plans. And the way we see it today may not be the way that car looks in 2030. But there's some things on the horizon at Nissan that I've been digging into this and researching that Nissan hasn't been just sitting on their thumbs. We've been assuming that, they're passing off on Honda and the offer to buy them up, and the fact that they're not innovating all these new ICE engines and drivetrains and these new vehicles that are competitive. One thing we know for sure is Nissan's been struggling with the hybrid market. Sure, while they had vehicles like the Leaf and Ariya, they have the electrified vehicles, not great sellers by any means, but the fact remains is they're not necessarily paying attention to the hybrid drivetrains. Until now. See, with brands like Toyota and Honda and those manufacturers, they know what the customers are looking for. Most customers don't want to be attached and tethered to a cable. Most customers today in North America, when you live isolated and it's 60 miles to work, round trip might be 150 miles, you've got to make a few stops, and extreme weather might hamper some of those opportunities to drive long distances too. Because batteries right now and the technology might get you 250, 300, maybe 400 miles on extended range cars. But that's clearly not enough for a lot of buyers. And more importantly, a lot of buyers just say, look, I can't go all in, but some level of electrification seems to be popular these days. Look at Lexus, look at Toyota. They're selling like hotcakes. They could not keep that inventory in. Lexus hybrids, Toyota hybrids. Remember back 2-3 years ago, they could not keep electric vehicles in their arsenal. Or when I say electric, I mean hybrid. Because Toyota's not on board with going pure EV yet. What they are doing, in fact, is transitioning to all their vehicles and models by 25, 26 to look more like some sort of a hybrid, plug-in or otherwise. Battery electric vehicles clearly aren't necessarily the mainstay for Toyota. Nissan may be looking at another plan. But let's talk about some of these big changes in Nissan, because there are some plans in the works. And until I did some digging, I didn't realize it, and I sort of assumed that they were just letting the cow out the pasture and let it off to die. Now, one of these plans, according to Nissan and sort of insiders, seem to be related to the electrification. They're looking ahead and saying, look, this is where the market is trending, but to get there, we need to transition. Some of that looks like hybrid. So they're looking at transitioning some hybridization into some of their vehicles and going pure EVs with others. As a matter of fact, they're saying they hope to capture 40% of their global sales to be electric vehicles by 2030. They also want to expand on the range. They want to invest in battery technology, and they want to be on the forefront of that. They also want to make sure that a lot of their models are relevant, that they're affordable. And see, what a lot of people are losing sight when obviously they're building these big, expensive electric vehicles like, Jaguar, we look at Mercedes, Benz, we look at Porsche, and you think the Audi e-tron GTs. And when you're talking about six-figure electric vehicles, most buyers just don't have that and they don't want it. But when vehicles like Slate came out, when they offered a $20,000 electric truck, people perked up. And that's what Nissan's going to be focusing on. Battery enhancement, developing affordable electric vehicles, and again, a significant market increase in market share by 2030 to be primarily electric vehicles. Some further developments in Nissan's arsenal was addressing the Z car. They wanted to bring that car back. It was legendary. And if there's one thing that we know Nissan was missing, it was, well, how do you say, they didn't have any halo cars. You know, the Nissan GTR feels overpriced. They underdeveloped the interior, and quite honestly, the car felt low budget in a lot of ways. Now, it has legendary performance, but there was hints and sniffs that Nissan was looking at further enhancing the GTR. But a lot of that looked like it was going to be an electrified version. The Z car, even though they're now coming out recently, conversations about the Z car coming out with a Nismo that's manual gearbox, they're looking at further enhancing this 400Z, or the Z car as they say. It's a great car. It's a lot of fun. I remember having one years ago, and I can truly tell you they're a ton of fun to drive. And that was one of the niche vehicles that Nissan was offering to try to get more interest back in the brand. And it kind of worked to a point. But they also know Nissan is seeking this neutrality, if you will, CO, carbon emissions, and they're looking at transitioning. And as I've said, they're looking at transitioning something in the near term to look a little bit more like a hybrid, transition from ICE with a little bit of hybrid support to the eventuality of the Z car being entirely electric. That's right, you heard that here. The Z car may be a pure electric car. Further conversation to that is possibly the GTR may also be an electrified vehicle. When you push and go far enough down the road, that's what they're proposing. Now, one thing that's obvious to me, where Nissan was sort of that affordable manufacturer for quite a few years. And as they transition into electrification, well, I think what we're going to see is a lot more expense added to these vehicles. Great. We're all thinking, yeah, we don't need more expensive vehicles. And the problem is, when they're talking about transitioning the EVs into EVs, and the Z car being one of those, the UK already has more or less a mandate by 2030 to have all petrol and diesel engines be discontinued. Well, Nissan's looking at that mandate and saying, well, there's no point in us continue developing and enhancing that technology and developing and creating a more powerful, more robust internal combustion vehicle when half the globe is not even going that way. The majority of Europe, either EU7 regulations 2035, and in many countries by 2030, the vast majority, if not all vehicles sold, will be electric vehicles for this carbon neutrality, according to a lot of these industry experts. And now, what they're saying, unfortunately, with Nissan, is this development of the Z car into a pure EV means that it's going to get more expensive. Because if there's one thing that we learned, a lot of these OEMs like GM and, we talk about the General Motors and all these other brands, specifically, one specifically being Stellantis and the Ram and the Jeeps. Think of all of those brands that start jacking their prices up. A lot of it was because of increased labor costs, but there was another big element there. It had to do with this understanding what it takes to develop those cars, those properties, and of course the expensive products that go into these batteries. So to develop the car properly and then manufacture it is a costly venture. And now they're going to have to utilize the sales of a lot of their ICE vehicles and what's outstanding on the showroom floors today to help them stage that transition to get into pure EVs. So as we see these next few years go on, from 2025, 6, 7, 8, 9, and of course 2030, where Nissan's looking to primarily be selling electric vehicles, this development, this progress, as it were, looks to be a very expensive one. As they continue to develop these models and these technologies and expand on that, it's got to come from somewhere. The consumer is going to be paying for that. So while there's some exciting new interest, we're seeing the Z car, of course, maybe with a manual Nismo, and there might be some other odds and sods that pop out here. Their primary focus is zero emissions, battery development, Z car, affordable runabout EV cars, and just basically expanding their footprint. They're trying to take back some of that market share that they lost and longed for so long. But I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think Nissan actually has a legit plan that may actually hold up? Does it seem like something that's going to work for them? And is there something more tangible? Still, the question has to be asked. What would it take me to go to a Nissan on a newly developed product when I've got a manufacturer over here that's been doing it for 5 or 10 years that already knows how to do it reliably? What's that transition? What does that marketing campaign look like to get me over there? And what does Nissan have to actually do to get me to buy a new product? Anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Again, as always, don't be scared to share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Talk to y'all real soon, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.